The morning began with the kind of heaviness that seems to settle over a person long before the sun climbs above the horizon. In the quiet diner off Highway 41, with its fluorescent hum and the scent of burnt coffee drifting like a tired ghost, a moment unfolded that would ripple through 2 wounded lives. Evan Walsh, a single dad barely holding the frayed edges of his world together, sat across from a young woman whose sweater was torn and whose eyes carried a storm's worth of hunger. One trembling breath was all it took for him to realize she wasn't just starving for food. She was starving for something far deeper, something she might not even believe she deserved anymore. And as he slid his plate toward her, an unspoken promise passed between them, stirring the still air with the fragile beginnings of change. If you believe in kindness, redemption, or second chances, please take a moment to like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who might need hope today, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that lift the heart. Evan hadn't meant to stop at the diner that day. He was supposed to be rushing to drop his daughter, Abby, off at school, then heading straight to his warehouse shift. But life had been hitting him like a relentless tide these past few months, and the morning chaos, Abby's forgotten backpack, a spilled orange juice, a burst pipe at the house he was trying to renovate alone, left him needing 5 minutes of stillness before facing the world. Abby was already at school when he finally pulled into the diner parking lot, rubbing sleep from his red-rimmed eyes and trying not to think about the stack of bills on his kitchen table. Inside, he ordered a simple breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, and a biscuit he barely tasted. He sat in his booth by the window, tapping a cracked knuckle against the table, when the door creaked open and she stepped in, a girl who looked no older than 22, but whose posture suggested she carried far more years of weariness on her shoulders. Her jeans were muddy, her sweater hung lopsided with threadbare holes, and her hair was an uncombed curtain poorly hiding her thin, anxious frame. No one in the diner looked up. No one except Evan. She sat in the booth across from him, not by choice but because every other seat was taken. The diner was busy with morning regulars, truckers, and factory workers, all swallowed by their own rush. The girl's fingers trembled as she folded her hands together, pressing them under her chin as if trying to keep herself from falling apart. Evan noticed how she kept glancing toward the plates sliding past on the servers' trays, how her throat bobbed each time someone lifted a fork toward their mouth. When the waitress approached her, the girl whispered a request so soft it nearly dissolved into the clatter of dishes. "Just water." The waitress raised an eyebrow, scribbled on her pad, and moved on without comment. But Evan felt something twist inside him. It wasn't pity, it was recognition. The same look he had worn the first week after his wife, Clara, passed away. That hollow mixture of confusion and survival instinct. The sense of being stranded in your own life. Without thinking about how strange it might seem, he gently nudged his plate toward her, the way one might pass a lifeline across a widening crack in the earth. Her eyes snapped toward him. For a moment, the spark of fear flashed across her face, but then something else flickered, astonishment, perhaps, or disbelief that kindness was directed at her. She didn't move at first. Hunger and hesitation wrestled beneath her ribs. Then, slowly, she accepted the plate as though someone had handed her a fragile treasure. She ate with the desperation of someone who had been hungry far longer than any person should be. Evan didn't ask questions. He just sat quietly, watching the snow-reflective light filter through the window, unsure whether he should speak or simply let her exist in the safety of silence. Something about her reminded him of Abby, those uncertain, searching eyes, the way a person looked when they had learned to brace for disappointment. As she finished the last bite, she wiped her mouth with the back of her sleeve, avoiding his gaze. When she finally spoke, her voice was raw from disuse. She told him her name was Harper. She had left behind a household filled with shouting, slammed doors, and hands that didn't know gentleness. She had been sleeping behind a grocery store for the past week, trying to make her way to a city she had always believed held better dreams. She hadn't eaten in 2 days, hadn't slept well in longer, and the cold February wind felt like it was carving through her bones. Evan felt his breath catch. He remembered Clara's voice coaxing him to always stay open-hearted, even on days he barely felt capable of standing. Kindness, she used to say, never wasted itself, it always found its way back. He asked Harper if she had somewhere safe to go. She shook her head, eyes falling to the table. The weight of her loneliness was so palpable it settled across the booth like a heavy coat. Evan didn't have much to offer. His bank account was shallow, his house half repaired, his life stretched like thin wire pulled too tight. But he had space. And for reasons he couldn't name, he felt like Harper had walked into that diner because she was meant to cross paths with him. He offered her a meal to go and a ride to the nearest shelter. She accepted with gratitude, hesitant as a wounded bird. But when they arrived at the shelter, a handwritten sign on the door announced it was full due to the freezing temperatures. Harper didn't break. She just wrapped her arms around herself and tried to convince him she'd be fine. Evan couldn't leave her there. Some internal compass guided him, one that had always pointed toward compassion even when his own life was a mess. He asked her if she wanted to stay in his guest room for the night, no strings attached, just warmth and safety. She stared at him, wide-eyed and uncertain, as though she'd stumbled into a story she wasn't sure she belonged in. But she nodded. That night changed everything. Abby met Harper the next morning. Instead of fear or suspicion, Abby reached out with the blunt innocence only a child carries, handing Harper a glittery sticker shaped like a star. Harper smiled, truly smiled, for the first time in a long while, and the room felt lighter for it. Days passed. Harper stayed longer than one night, then another, then a week. She helped Abby with homework. She swept floors. She mended Evan's torn shirt with shaky but determined hands. Each act seemed to stitch her closer to a sense of home she didn't dare believe she could have. Evan watched the transformation quietly. Harper began eating regularly again, sleeping deeply, and laughing in small bursts, like someone relearning how to breathe. He didn't ask her to share the darker parts of her story, but she offered them in fragments over time, memories of nights spent praying the shouting would stop, mornings spent trying to make herself small enough to avoid harm. Evan listened. Not with pity, but with the attention of someone who knew what broken hearts sounded like. As weeks turned into months, Harper found a job at a local cafe. The manager, a woman named Teresa with bright red glasses, saw the gentleness in Harper and hired her on the spot. Evan drove her to her first shift, cheering her forward with a soft smile. Harper grew steadier. Stronger. More rooted. She started learning what it meant to be valued, not for what she could endure, but for who she was becoming. The community around them noticed the change. Neighbors who once passed Evan with polite but distant nods began waving, stopping to talk, bringing over small housewarming items for the still under renovation home. Harper became part of those conversations, accepted and welcomed as though she had always been meant to belong there. Months after that morning in the diner, Harper finally told Evan that his kindness had saved her life. She told him she had been close to giving up entirely, close to believing she wasn't worth the air she breathed. But his simple gesture, sharing breakfast, had opened a door she thought was permanently locked. Evan felt something shift inside him, something warm and steady. He realized Harper had given his life new meaning too. She had reminded him of the importance of showing up, of choosing compassion even when the world felt unkind. Their lives intertwined naturally, softly, like vines climbing toward sunlight. Not as replacements for what each had lost, but as companions on a path toward healing. And on a quiet spring evening, as fireflies flickered outside the porch and Abby played with chalk on the driveway, Harper told Evan she had finally forgiven her past. Not forgotten, but forgiven. And in that fragile release, both of them understood how far they had come. If this story warmed your heart or reminded you of the quiet power of kindness, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your engagement helps more people find stories filled with hope. Before we end, please comment below, what small act of kindness have you witnessed, or given, that changed someone's day? Thank you for watching, and may your path today be filled with gentle light.